You know those moments when life feels so quiet you'd swear you're stuck in a sitcom where the laugh track never plays? Like nothing's happening, and you're perfectly okay with that. That was me, sitting by my window one Tuesday afternoon, coffee in one hand, scrolling through my phone with the other, when the moving truck rolled up next door. Now, I've never been the nosy type, but you catch these little details from a fresh neighbor moving in. This guy, Jake, showed up like he was trying to ghost the world. No blaring music, no loud partying, just silence. It was kind of refreshing, but then there was this weird vibe about him. Like, you know how some people seem normal until you realize they're not quite? Jake had that normal, but something's off air. I noticed it first when he was hauling boxes inside. He moved slow, methodical-like. He was packing his whole past along carefully, piece by fragile piece. And what caught me off guard, weirdly enough, was the way he glanced over at my place, maybe 3 or 4 times in a row. Not casually either. It was like every look was a question he wasn't asking out loud. That's when a tiny shiver snuck down my spine. You see, I'm no stranger to odd encounters bringing chaos. My life wasn't always this quiet cul-de-sac and iced coffee mornings. A few years back, things got complicated. Real messy. And though I've been trying to keep all that buried deep, the moment Jake moved in, it felt like a subtle alarm went off somewhere inside me. Sometimes the past doesn't just stay in the past. It sneaks in on the tiniest breeze, dragging old dust with it. And honestly, I didn't know if I was ready for this breeze or that dust. The whole neighborhood probably didn't think much about Jake beyond the usual new guy. But to me, this was more like the opening scene of a movie I never wanted to star in again. Something was about to spiral, I could feel it, and I had no idea if Jake was the spark or just the catalyst. Funny thing is, I'd never tell my mom this part, but when I first saw him, all those years came rushing back. The fights, the secrets, the times I had to run, not just physically, but from the versions of myself I wasn't proud of. And here, in this quiet little street lined with identical houses and perfectly trimmed lawns, the cracks started showing again. So yeah, Jake moving in wasn't just about a new neighbor. It was the day my peaceful little bubble burst wide open. I just didn't know it yet. But looking back now, I can say for sure. Sometimes a person doesn't have to say a word to turn your world upside down. Just showing up is enough. I guess that's when you start paying attention because trouble's knocking, and it's waiting for you to answer. Alright, so let me back up a bit and properly introduce myself, because somewhere between silent neighborhoods and mysterious new neighbors, it's easy to forget the guy in the middle of this mess is just trying to start over. That guy? Yeah, that's me. I'm not exactly one of those people who casually changes their life like swapping out outfits. Nah, I carry my past around like a dented suitcase I'd rather not unpack. A few years ago, things got, well, messy. Legal brushes, some bad decisions, losing people I cared about. Not exactly the highlight reel you'd want anyone to know about. After paying my dues, both literal and emotional, I moved to this sleepy suburban cul-de-sac in a small American town, hoping the low-key vibe would give me the fresh start I so badly needed. Funny thing about starting fresh, though, your past? Oh, it's like glitter. No matter how much you wipe or shake it off, a bit of it always sticks around. So, when Jake, my new neighbor and alleged silent spectator, moved in, I couldn't shake this creeping paranoia. Sure, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Jake hasn't said 2 words to me yet, and maybe he's just a quiet dude who likes living under the radar, but it's the small stuff that got under my skin. Like the very first morning after he moved in, I caught him standing by his window, staring right at my backyard while holding a cup of black coffee. Not a glance or casual curiosity type stare, I mean full-on, intense, like he was looking for cracks in my fence or, I don't know, reading the lines on my palm through the glass. Or the way he'd leave his blinds half closed, casting these odd shadows in his living room that made me wonder if he was watching me just as much as I was watching him. It's dumb, I know. But when your past looks like a shadow following your every step, these little observations feel like a breadcrumb trail of trouble. And then there was that incident with the mailbox. I was out grabbing the daily paper when I noticed Jake fiddling with his mailbox. Except, it wasn't just any fiddling. The guy pulled out a torn piece of paper from the slot, glanced around like a secret agent, and, waited for it, shoved it quickly down the front of his shirt. Not the smoothest espionage move, if you ask me. Curiosity got the better of me, so I scooted over under the guise of nodding hello. Hey, everything all right with your mail? I asked. Jake blinked, then smiled, his kind of half-lip, half-smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, it's nothing. Just some junk. Don't worry about it. Now, call me nosy or paranoid, but that felt like the first real crack in his calm exterior. Why hide a piece of paper? And why did my chest tighten like I'd somehow just stumbled onto a live wire? Not long after all this, my mom called. She's the kind of person who's been in my corner since day one. Supportive, sure, but also worrywart enough to imagine every possible disaster if I sneeze wrong. When I told her about Jake, she put on her serious mom voice, half annoyed, half concerned. You know, sometimes trouble sneaks in on quiet feet, she said, voice low, like sharing a conspiracy. Be careful, okay? People who don't seem to belong, sometimes they've got their reasons for hiding. I tried to laugh it off for her sake, but hearing her say that hit home more than I wanted to admit. And here's what's weird, around the same time Jake showed up, so did Mike, my old friend. Or maybe it's better to say, complicated friend. Mike wasn't someone I exactly wanted to bump into on a casual day, especially not now. He was tightly woven into my past. The reckless, chaotic chapters I was hoping had ended for good. To say Mike and I had history would be generous, let's just say our story was a tangled mess of loyalty and bad timing. Mike turned up on my porch one humid evening, looking like he hadn't changed a bit, which was both comforting and alarming. His grin was the same, sly and a bit too easy, but his eyes darted around like he was hiding something. He handed me a beer and said, "Didn't expect to find you with the perfect suburban life, man." "Neither did I replied, forcing a half smile. "What brings you here?" "Just passing through," he said, but that didn't sit right with me, it never did. Mike's visits were never just passing through. They were loaded, full of unspoken history waiting to explode. Light and the timing? Jake appears next door, acting like he's got a radar for me, and Mike shows up at my doorstep. Come on, that's more than coincidence. It's like someone had hit the start button on a bad rerun of my life. Days went by, and I started noticing Jake's little habits got downright weird. He wasn't just observing me from a distance, it felt like he knew things he shouldn't. Like one afternoon, I caught him rearranging some plants on his porch, only what caught my eye was that one of the pots had an old photo tucked under it. Photo of me. I don't know how he even got hold of it, but my heart jumped into my throat. Was this just neighborhood spy games? Or was Jake trying to peel back the curtain on the life I was so desperate to keep hidden? I wanted to ask him outright, but my mouth went dry any time I stood near his door. And honestly, part of me was scared of what I'd find out. If Jake was digging into my past, what was his game? And more important, why now? Meanwhile, Mom kept texting me, her words brimming with that familiar mixture of encouragement and worry. Don't let anyone shake you. Remember, you're not the same person you were. Easy for her to say when she isn't the one lying awake at night imagining how one quiet guy could unravel everything. And Mike? Well, every time I saw that guy, I felt like a storm was gathering right on my doorstep. His presence was a living reminder of where I'd been and maybe where I was about to end up if I wasn't careful. So there I was, stuck in this bizarre sitcom where the new neighbor wasn't just a guy moving boxes, and my old friend wasn't just dropping by for a chat. There was something brewing beneath these everyday moments, something that felt like it was pulling me toward a past I wasn't sure I was ready to face again. But hey, sometimes the past doesn't wait for an invitation. And Jake, he wasn't just a quiet guy anymore, not to me. Not with all these little signs flashing yellow like warning lights on a dashboard. It was like my whole fresh start was beginning to tangle up into something else, something messy, unpredictable, and very much alive. So yeah, I was trying real hard to keep my head down and blend into this peaceful neighborhood. But Jake moving in next door kind of shattered that plan. And whether I liked it or not, the game had already begun. Things started spiraling faster than I expected. Jake's cryptic little notes were the first real nudge into chaos. One morning, I found a folded slip of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. No signature, just a sentence scribbled in neat, almost too perfect handwriting. Some doors should stay closed. I stared at it longer than I probably should have, heart thudding like I'd just been slapped by a ghost from my past. I tried to shake it off, chalked it up to some weird neighborhood prank, but that's when Mike's behavior started veering off the rails. One night, out of nowhere, he showed up at my door, face flushed, eyes darting like he'd seen a ghost himself. "You gotta be careful, man," he hissed once inside, locking the door behind him. "Jake's not just some quiet guy. He's got his eye on you, and not in a friendly way." I raised my eyebrows, trying to mask my unease. "What exactly does that mean?" Mike paced a little, leaning heavily on the outdated couch like he was trying to balance his own storm. "Let's just say Jake's got history that intersects with yours more than you realize. And he's not here to be neighbors." That hit me like a punch I wasn't expecting. Before I could ask more, Mike went silent, eyes darkening like he was debating whether to say more or just disappear into the night. But then came the day the delivery guy rang my doorbell, holding a package that wasn't meant for me, or at least I thought so. It was addressed to Jake, but the sender was some law firm from out of state. I frowned, feeling an itch of curiosity I couldn't quite scratch away. I almost handed it back when the delivery guy, clearly annoyed, said, "Look, man, it's just mail. But tell your neighbor he shouldn't be hiding if he doesn't want people digging." Wait, what? My mind raced. Was Jake hiding? And if so, why? I tucked the package inside and, because I clearly wasn't learning my lesson, I peeked inside later that evening. Inside was a thick file filled with documents and photos, most of which featured a different name slapped over Jake's and some mentions of investigations, shady deals, and even a few headlines clippings from years back I recognized instantly. My stomach sank farther than the last time I got dumped. Jake wasn't just a mysterious quiet guy, he was tangled in his own mess. And now we were stuck with each other like two storm clouds hovering over the same block, threatening to rain down old troubles. We had to talk, right? So one afternoon I walked over to his place, chest tight with every step. When Jake opened the door, I could see the faint outline of surprise flicker in his eyes. "I know you're watching me," I blurted, words rushing out like I'd been holding them underwater too long. "And yeah, I've seen the package. What the hell is going on?" Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like a bad habit. Then, in a voice that was quieter than I expected, he said, "Look, I didn't come here to dig up your past. I came here to protect something, maybe even protect you." "Hold on. Protect me?" For a second, I didn't know what to say. Protect from what? From who? Before I could frame a response, Mike showed up in the backyard, stepping out from behind the fence like this whole neighborhood had become a stage for some long-awaited showdown. "You two have some stories to tell," Mike said, voice low but charged. That afternoon stretched on with a tension thick enough to slice through. Truths spilled reluctantly from lips that weren't used to honesty, memories tangled with regrets, secrets coded in half-truths. Jake revealed that his reason for moving in wasn't a coincidence. He was running from his own past, which tangled closely with the mess Mike and I were part of years ago. He wasn't just watching me, he was watching out for me, though we both knew trust was a currency still in deficit. Mike, surprisingly, had his own confession tucked underneath his bravado. The unpredictable friend was looking for a chance to make things right, or at least less wrong. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows around the three of us, guys caught in the orbit of past mistakes and present grudges. Even though some answers landed heavier than I thought, something in that showdown didn't feel like defeat. It felt like a reckoning. A messy, uncomfortable reckoning, but maybe the kind we needed. And as I headed back inside that evening, my mind was buzzing with a new, unsettling thought. Maybe Jake wasn't the threat. Maybe the real battle was deciding what part of the past to hold on to and what parts we had to finally let go. After that day, things didn't magically get easier, but the air definitely shifted. Jake, Mike, and I, we weren't just neighbors or ghosts from some dusty old chapter anymore. We'd carved out this tense, uneasy truce stitched together by awkward honesty and a shared recognition that pretending the past wasn't there wasn't working anymore. Walking into my house after our showdown, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter, yet the doubts didn't vanish overnight. Trust wasn't some switch you flipped, you earn it, sometimes in tiny doses, often with a side of skepticism. Jake showed up at my door a few days later, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Figured maybe we could start fresh," he said, shrugging a little like that made it easier. I didn't say anything at first, just took the cup and nodded. It was an odd moment. 2 guys who could have been enemies in another timeline trying to build something new over caffeine. Meanwhile, Mike kept his distance but sent texts that were surprisingly grounded, like he was trying to rewrite the script of his own role in all this. Not that I'm naive, old wounds don't just disappear. They smolder, sometimes flare up, but they also teach you something about who you are and who you want to stop being. I wrestled with this shadowy new normal for a while. The whole time Mom was on the phone, her voice a lifeline. "You're stronger than your history," she said in that calm, slightly exasperated tone I know well. "But don't forget, it's okay to lean on people, even if it's just the guy next door." That was the hardest part. Could I really lean on Jake, the guy whose mysterious silence terrified me, or was I just setting myself up to fall flat again? One evening, I caught Jake working in his garage, surrounded by stacks of old boxes and those ominous filing folders. I called out, "Need a hand?" He looked up, eyes softening for the first time. "Maybe. You ever feel like your past is a puzzle missing a few pieces, and you don't even know if you want to finish it?" I laughed, a little dry, and said, "Every damn day." We started swapping stories, not everything, just enough to see we were both carving out space to be someone else, someone better. It wasn't about erasing what happened, but figuring out where to go from here. Mike showed up a week later, garage sale stuff in tow, offering a half grin and an awkward apology. "Guess I'm not great at goodbyes," he said, shrugging off years of tension with a shrug and a beer. We sat on my porch, watching the sun dip behind the quiet street, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of things unsaid. And here's where it gets murky. Did I win? Did I dodge some bullet? I'm still not sure. Maybe Jake and Mike are just new chapters, not final answers. Or maybe they're reminders that the past isn't some story you close the book on. It's more like having bookmarks you can't quite pull out. What I do know is this. That day Jake moved in and all the chaos that followed forced me to look my history in the eye. Not as a victim or a fugitive, but as someone who might just be ready to rewrite the ending. So if your past ever shows up uninvited, maybe even next door, what would you do? Would you slam the door shut or open it just a bit and see who's really there? Me? I'm still standing at that door, coffee in hand, trying to figure out if it's time to step outside or invite the trouble in. And honestly, I think that's where the real story begins.